Now, there's a debate in the House of Commons today which campaigners are hoping will recognise the Tainted blood scandal as one of the biggest treatment disasters in the history of the NHS. Thousands of people were affected by HIV and hepatitis C after being given tainted blood supplies in the 70s and 80s. People from Shropshire have died as a result. Andy Evans is from Evesham and he contracted HIV when he was just 5. He's calling for a review into this along the lines of the Hillsborough inquiry. Morning, Andy.
Good morning.
What happened to you then? Tell us how this all came about.
Well, I'm a haemophiliac. 1,200 haemophiliacs in this country were infected with HIV, and a further 4,500 were infected with hepatitis C as well. Me personally, I was infected, as you say, at age 5 through my factor VIII concentrate, which was source of human blood at the time. So despite warnings from America about the importing of products that were tainted, the government went ahead and did it, and this is the situation we find ourselves in.
How did you find out that you'd contracted it?
My parents were told about my infection when I was about 7 years old, but they didn't tell me until I was 13.
Wow.
And the reason they told me was that I was becoming ill and I needed to go on medication, which was horrible at the time. It was AZT. It was the worst. It was the only drug that was available, and it was very experimental, and they were giving it to people in high doses.
Why was it horrible? Why was it horrible?
Well, it was because they were giving it to people in high doses. They were giving much too much of it, and it was actually depleting the immune system rather than affecting the virus. And so actually it tipped people over to full-blown AIDS rather than treating the HIV. Not to mention the side effects such as, vomiting, fevers, all of the nasty stuff that you get with toxic medication. I remember vividly on one journey on the way to school on the coach, after having had my AZT, just sort of feeling incredibly sick and then just vomiting everywhere on the coach just because of these medications, which, as you can imagine, being 13, 14 years old was very embarrassing.
How have you dealt with this? I mean, from the age of 5, that's quite a lot to take on as a teenager, isn't it?
I guess it is. Obviously I didn't know about it until I was 13. But, at that point I was still a kid. I mean, when my parents told me, you're invincible at 13, aren't you? You think that you're going to live through it. You think you're going to, grow up and be a doctor and find a cure, or, things like that. You don't take it on board as being something that's going to kill you until you're actually faced with lying in that hospital bed with a nasogastric tube and a drip, fighting for your life.
Your parents must have been furious, surely.
Absolutely. Furious, frightened, any emotion, you name it. It was terrible. It was terrible for them. Now, I can't imagine what they were going through.
No, I can't either. There have been several government inquiries. How much headway have they made then? So,
the government inquiries, loose term. We had the Archer inquiry in the late 2000s, which was a privately funded inquiry. It was headed up by Lord Archer of Sandwell, but it was privately funded. It was nothing to do with the government, and it's obviously its remit being private. It wasn't a legal inquiry, so it couldn't call people to the stand. So nobody from the government gave evidence,
right?
And of course that sort of limited its remit in terrible ways. And then we had the statutory inquiry, but it was only dealing with Scotland. That was the Penrose inquiry just a few years ago. And that one's remit was not to find fault or blame either. And it really was narrow in its remit in that it didn't deal with HIV infection really at all in the UK or in Scotland. And so we've kind of been left with a situation where the government won't introduce an inquiry because they believe inquiries have happened in the past and we won't learn anything new, whereas those inquiries were wholly inadequate.
What are you hoping for today then from today's debate?
So what we're hoping for at the moment is not a full-blown inquiry. I don't think we're going to learn anything new. All the evidence is out there, and we know that there was fault on behalf of the government and the pharmaceutical companies.
Do you want them to accept blame then?
Well, we do. I mean, Britain is one of the only countries in the world who hasn't faced the blame for this scandal. It's happened all over the world. People were sent to prison in France for this. In Canada as well. In Japan, ministers kowtowed in front of people who were infected and apologised. And obviously throughout all of this, people are still struggling with finances. They're struggling with their health, the benefit system, trying to wrangle their way through that because they can't work, they're too ill to work. And the government is handing out the bare minimum in support throughout all of this, just to make people reliant upon that support. It's just a ridiculous situation. So if we can get an inquiry to recognise the fault that went on, maybe we can force the government's hand into standing up and giving out what they really deserve for this.
Andy, it's good to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us on the programme this morning.
Thanks very much.
Sir Andy Evans from Evesham, who contracted HIV when he was 5 through receiving tainted blood.
18 minutes to 8.